Welcome to Law Excellence Hindu News Analysis. From today onwards, Law Excellence started Hindu News Analysis on daily basis. We hope this initiative adds value to your preparation. Today we are going to discuss these 4 articles that are given in the Hindu editorials. Before moving to the first article, just pause the video and try to answer these PYQ questions about inflation. Today's first article is food prices for retail inflation to 6.2% in October. Now, this article is saying that food inflation is highest in the last 57 months. Now, this article is relevant from the prelims perspective. As you have seen in the starting of the video, there are previous year questions asked about inflation, right? So, inflation means nothing but a general rise in the prices of goods and services. Now, this article is saying that recently, due to the global supply chain disruptions, the food prices were increased. Especially, they are increased by about 40 to 50%. And this increase is mostly seen in the vegetables, fruits, edible oils due to the global supply chain disruptions and basic infrastructural bottlenecks that are there in India. Now, this article also mentioned that the food inflation is very high in rural areas compared to the urban areas. Now, this is what the context of the news. Now, let us know some important facts about the inflation from the prelims perspective. As you know, inflation is general rise in the level of prices, but not everyone has an equal capacity to purchase the goods and services because of economic inequality in a country. So RBI under the monetary policy framework has the responsibility to reduce the inflation to 4% plus or minus 2. So because of this, it changes often rates through the monetary policy. Now, to attain these goals of monetary policy committee, RBI is targeting CPI headline inflation as a standard. From the prelims perspective, you have to know what are the components in the CPI headline inflation and which organization releases this. And you have to know certain differences between the CPI inflation and wholesale inflation. CPI, consumer price inflation, it measures the changes in prices of both goods and services at the retail level, that is at the consumer level. Whereas wholesale price index it is a mechanism that measures the changes in prices of goods between the business to business, that is at the wholesale level. That is the main difference. Now, if you see consumer price index, especially this is released by the NSO, which is under the Ministry of Statistics and Program Implementation. From the prelims perspective, this is very important to remember. And the base year of CPI is 2012. Now, there are certain components in the CPI you have to know. One is food and beverages, pan, tobacco, intoxicants, clothing, footwear. As it is said that CPI measures both goods and services. That's why we have, along with these food beverages, we have education, healthcare as a services. Now, highest weightage in this consumer price index is food and beverages. Now, this was asked in the previous prelims paper as an option. Now, the recent context that is seen that there is increase in the food prices. When there is increase in the food prices, it is more impacting the consumer price index than wholesale price index because food is more consumed at the consumer level, right, than the business level, wholesale level. Now, next, whether services are included in the consumer price index. Yes, services are included in the consumer price index, but not included in the wholesale price index. Next, whether indirect taxes are included or not. Yes, indirect taxes included. You may know that when we are buying any goods, it may be chocolate, wrap, or anything, indirect taxes are included in it. Now, which of the one targeted by the RBI to control the inflation? Yes, it is the CPI headline inflation that is targeted by the RBI, not WPI. Let us know some facts about the wholesale price index also. It measures inflation at the wholesale level. That's first thing. Next, wholesale price index is released by the Office of Economic Advisor, who is under the Ministry of Commerce and Industry. Now, the base year for wholesale price index is 2011-12. Now, there are certain articles which are taken for the consideration for measurement of wholesale price index. They are primary articles, manufacturing goods, fuel and power. Now, among these 3 articles, the highest weightage is given to the manufactured products. That's why even if you see, because of the increasing food prices, it is more affecting CPI because CPI given the highest weightage of food products. And now this was asked in the previous year PYQs of prelims. That's all from the prelims perspective. Now coming to the next article. This article is saying that government cites 17 reasons to cancel the FCRA registration. Now, what is meant by FCRA registration? FCRA means Foreign Contribution Regulation Act. Now, the individuals or organizations who want to receive the foreign contribution must register under this act. Now, this is what the context of the news. That news is saying that recently Home Ministry notified certain NGOs in which that Home Ministry cancelled registration of these NGOs by saying that certain NGOs are involved in the malicious protest by taking money from the foreign organizations. They are also involved in the proselytization, religious conversion, and hence hampering the social fabric and religious harmony in the country. Not only that, other reasons it was said to cancel the FCRA registration is that these FCRA or these NGOs are not complying to the provisions of the FCRA. They are not disclosing the amounts that they got. They are not disclosing the details of the spending accounts, activities they have done, whether it is social or developmental activities to the government, and not responding timely to the government's request. Because of these reasons, Home Ministry recently notified that certain organizations FCRA registration is cancelled. Now, this is what the context of the news. Now, this article is relevant from the examination perspective. How it now, if you see the syllabus of the GS paper 2, there is a syllabus topic called Development Processes, Development Industry, in which it is given especially the role of NGOs, SHGs, and various donors and charities in developmental policies and policy formulation and policy implementation. Now, another question asked in 2015. Now, if you see, how can the role of NGOs be strengthened in India for the development works related to the protection of environment? Now, next thing, examine critically the recent changes in the rules governing the FCRA regarding NGOs. Now, this is what we discussed in this article, right? Now, in this context, we will discuss certain provisions of the FCRA, especially from the prelims perspective. The first provision is prohibiting the transfer. That means FCRA doesn't allow any organizations to transfer the fund that they got under FCRA to another organizations. That means that they have to use the fund that they got for themselves only and under the such organizations. And next provision, the fund they got under FCRA, in which only 20% of the fund should be used in the administrative expenses. That means giving salaries to the office bearers, etc. Next, the organizations which want to get foreign funding under the FCRA Act, they should compulsorily register in the specified branch of the SBI in the New Delhi. They should not allow to register any other bank or any other branch of the SBI. They have to register under the specified branch of SBI in the New Delhi itself. Next, the organizations that are prosecuted or involved in the social disharmonic activities or seditious activities or religious conversion activities are not allowed or not qualified to get the foreign contribution fund. Next, this act barred certain individuals from taking the foreign contribution, especially journalists, media companies, judges, government servants, politicians, and political organizations. Why? Because these individuals are involved in the decision-making process in the country, whose decisions impact society, social, and political landscape. Hence, their decisions should be objective. Hence, they are barred from the foreign contribution fund. Next important provision is that thus FCRA registration is valid only for the 5 years. Once it is completed, it has to be renewed after every 6 months. Now, this is what the important provision. If at all this FCRA registration is cancelled, they need to wait for other 3 years to get FCRA registration. Now, that is what one of the important provision under the FCRA Act. Now, this is what important from the prelims perspective. Now, we will see the role of NGOs in the society, especially in ensuring the social justice development of the country. Now, from the mains perspective, we will analyze the role of NGOs in our society. See, government may not have the adequate capital, human resources to reach the public services to the last mile and last person. Now, in this context, NGOs will act as an extended hand of the government. In that way, it plays one important role is the service contractors. For example, it used NGOs, human resources, and capital in providing public services. For example, NGOs like Akshay Patra are helping government in implementing the midday meal scheme. There are NGOs which are helping the government in protecting the environment because government has many tasks. They cannot allocate the resources, everything for everyone, and there are vulnerable sections in the society, right? In all these areas, government may not be sufficient to involve themselves in these areas. Now, here NGOs play a very key role. Next important role played by the NGO is accountability and transparency to the government. For example, NGOs often get the information under the RTI Act. They question the government about the activities, about the expenditure. In this way, ensure government on toes and accountability to the people. This is one of the important role played by the NGOs. And one such role we can see is that this enactment of RTA itself is the outcome of one of the organizations, right? Now the NGO acts as a channel for donors, right? As it is said that government may not have adequate capital or capacity, financial capacity to fund the welfare programs. Hence, NGOs act as a channels for diverting the funds from the private sector, corporates, or foreign funds towards the social welfare activities. This is one of the important thing. Now, other important thing is that reaching the last mile. As it is said that not every government office is can be reached to the last mile. For example, tribal areas. Now, in such areas, many NGOs playing key role in tribal areas in providing the health, education, infrastructure, social facilities, etc. Now, other important thing is that it is solving the short-term problem of unemployment also. Now, why this is important? Because now the many people are going for the social entrepreneur. Now, in this way, it is solving the problem of employment also. Now, this is what the role of NGOs in our society. Now, there are certain issues in the functioning of NGOs also. Now, it is said that NGOs are the associations that are formed under the freedom of association given under the Article 19, right? But this freedom is misusing by the certain organizations like this. There is a lack of transparency. It is being said that in India, there are more NGOs than educational institutions. Now, under this context, there are many NGOs involved in the money laundering activities. Now, many wealthy individuals transferring their money to the NGOs under the guise of charitable money, and they're getting tax exemptions. Now, this is one of the issue. Now, other issue is that CBI recently disclosed that only 10% of the NGOs are disclosed their activities. Now, the remaining 90% are opaque in nature, functioning opaque. So, they are not disclosing how they are getting the money, how much they are getting, where they are spending, what are the activities that they are spending, what are the diversification portfolio activities that the NGOs are working, whether it is social sector, educational sector, agriculture. So there is no such disclosure activities, hence there is lack of transparency. Now, other important allegation is that these NGOs are taking the political funding and doing anti-developmental and malicious protest. For example, it is said that Kudankulam protest is one such anti-developmental protest. Now, it is said like that. Next, there are NGOs that are involved in social disharmonic activities. For example, proselytization, religious conversion. Recently, certain NGOs that are affiliated to the Christianity is alleged that they are involved in the proselytization. So, in this way, these malicious activities doing by the NGOs affecting the true NGOs and hence affecting the social development ecosystem in India. Now, this is what the analysis of NGOs and certain measures we can suggest is that we have to rank certain NGOs in certain sectors by awarding them recognition and remuneration. In this way, this create competition among the NGOs themselves to create a vibrant social welfare ecosystem. Now, the next article is about United Nations Framework Convention on Climate Change Conference, that is COP29, that is recently happening in the Azerbaijan capital Baku. This climate change conference will happen from November 11 to November 22. Now, in this context, it is saying that there is a breakthrough happened, especially this conference of parties clears the carbon credit trade. Now, before going into the context, I will explain what is carbon credit program. See, let's say there are two companies, A and B. Now, government has a target of reducing greenhouse gases. Let's say A as a company reduced 2 tons of emission in their annual emission of 10 tons. 10 tons of CO2, they reduced 2 tons, hence they emitted 8 tons of CO2. Now, B as a company has a target of reducing 10 tons of CO2, but they emitted 12 tons, hence they exceeded the target. Now, in this case, A has a 2 credits that they achieved. Now, they can sell these 2 credits to B. Now, in this way, mutually beneficial because both A and B are meeting the targets. Now, A is incentivized to reduce the greenhouse gas emissions. Now, B is allowed to have certain emissions. In this way, it is also achieving the target set by the government. It is a win-win situation for both organizations. And not only this, this helps in financing the activities of the climate change and transitioning of the green energy. Now, this is what the carbon credit mechanism. At the international level, this is very important because we often said that not everyone has equal capacity to adapt to the environment. Not every country has equal financial capacity to do activities for climate mitigation. And not every country is equally responsible for also because certain developed countries are industrialized very early. So they release a lot of emissions than the developing countries. Hence they have more responsibility. Now in this context, Paris Agreement given the term called common but differentiated responsibility. There is agreement about this common but differential responsibility. Now how this has to be leveraged, there is no answer. Now one such mechanism to answer this common but differentiated responsibility is carbon credit mechanism. Now this is a mechanism, this enables the transfer of money from developed to developed countries. How it is possible? Just like these two countries A and B, we can transfer the money from developed to developed countries. For example, there is a target of reducing emissions in the developed country, but they cannot reduce it because already there is a lot of industrialization happened in the developed countries. So to meet their targets, they invest that amount of money or technology transfer in developing countries, by virtue of which they get certain carbon credits from the developing country. Now this is what the mechanism of carbon credit mechanism. Now this carbon credit mechanism is particularly given in the Article 6 of the Paris Agreement. Now the author of this article is saying that it is very prime moment that after many years of discussion since Paris Agreement, a certain consensus was agreed among the member countries about the carbon trade. Though there is consensus happen, there is some challenges that can be faced by this carbon credit mechanism that was set by the author. The author is saying that though there is consensus about the carbon trade, there is difficulty about accounting of these carbon credits. How it is? Let's say there is no ground level methodology of what constitutes a carbon credit. There is no provision about what is the value of one carbon credit. There is no mechanism to calculate what constitutes carbon credit. For example, there is a person who is doing afforestation in 1 acre of land. There is a person who transitioning their entire factory from a coal power plant to solar power. Now, which activity has to get more carbon credits? There is no mechanism to do that. Now, there is no mechanism that evaluates what is the value of one carbon credit. Now, there is differential climate legal mechanisms in different countries. Hence, there is a need of seamless integration of these carbon credits across the country. There is no methodology also. In this way, there are a lot of roadblocks that are ahead. And that is what this article is saying. Now, in this context, this carbon credit mechanism is important from the prelims perspective. See, if you see the previous year question, 2014, it was asked that should the pursuit of carbon credit and clean development mechanism under the UNFCCC be maintained even though there has been a massive slide in the value of carbon credit? Discuss with respect to India's energy needs of economic growth. Now, in this context, this article can be important from the mains perspective, especially in the next coming year. From the mains perspective, we will analyze certain benefits of carbon credit mechanism. The first important thing is that funding of the projects. As it said, that developing countries has an obligation of doing welfare activities for its population. There is a lot of development deficit. Hence, they need to focus on welfare activities also. Hence, they need some extra assistance from the developed countries. In that case, developed countries can get the carbon credits by investing in the clean energy projects in the developing countries. In this way, funding can be generated. Next, the cost of meeting climate action plans reduces. Yes, it is not only true from the country's perspective, it is true from the individual and organizational perspective also. Next, as carbon credit mechanism is digitalized in nature, as carbon credits are taken on the registry, now this tracks the different initiatives of climate action at the digital level. For example, a person done afforestation program, it can be geotagged at the digital level, and that can be tracked. Like that, every activity can be tracked at the digital level. Now, this have a proper analysis of the greenhouse gases emissions and reductions. Now, this is very helpful in global stocktake of the nationally determined contributions under the UNFCCC. Next important thing is that because of the carbon credit mechanism, people will be very conscious about what they are consuming, and companies also very conscious about what they are producing. And overall, this helps in reducing the emissions. This is what the benefit of carbon credit mechanism. But there are certain challenges as highlighted by the author also. There is the issue of accounting itself. There is no proper mechanism to measure that how much amount of CO2 is reduced. For example, if an industry is transitioning from the coal thermal power plants to the solar energy, there is no mechanism to measure that how much CO2 is reduced from this activity. That is the first thing. And next, how much credit has to be given for certain green activity, whether it is transitioning to the green energy or it is afforestation activity or it is changing the lifestyles, etc. So there is no measure of how much credit has to be given. And another important thing is that there is no measure of what is the monetary value of these credits, right? For example, afforestation may cost, like, let's say 10 crores or 50 crores. Transitioning into the green energy may cost 100 crores. Now, these differential values lead to differential credits. Hence, there is no ground level methodology that realizes these differences. Hence, accounting is one of the big issue. Next is double counting. As the economy is majorly informal in nature, and there are two companies or two countries involved in the same green activity, there may be chances that double counting also. And this green credit program is also voluntary in nature. A lot of individuals may claim that they are participating in the same activity. This leads to double counting. Now, other important issue is that carbon leakage. Now, certain companies are changing their company's registration activities to environmental legislations countries, to the countries in which the legislations are less restrictive from the environmental perspective. Now, that is what carbon leakage. Now, remember this carbon leakage word. It is asking in the prelims also. Words like this. Now, next it is greenwashing. Now, recent days, greenwashing as a term asked in PYQ also prelims. Now, what is meant by greenwashing? Recently, corporates are pretending that they are doing environmentally friendly activities, but actually they are not doing. Now, this is what greenwashing. Next, hard to abate industries. There are certain industries in every economy that cannot transition into the green energy. For example, let's say there is a coal-based thermal power plant. Now, suddenly they cannot transform into solar energy, right? Now, in this case, it is very hard to change the industries. Now, that is also one of the important challenges. Now, these are the things that are important from the prelims perspective, especially related to the carbon credit mechanism. Now, the next article is saying that no invite from India, Nepal PM only to visit China in December. Now, this article is important from the context of the GS paper 2, India and neighborhood relations. Now, the context of the news is that recently, after being sworn in as a prime minister, Nepal Prime Minister KP Oli visited China. Now, the author is saying that as one of the first responded to the events in the Nepal PM not visited India. Now, this indicating the strained India-Nepal relations. That is what the author is saying. And the author also mentioned certain issues of strain recently that happened between India and Nepal. For example, recently India objected to the Chinese investment in the Nepal and Chinese interference in the India-Nepal collaborated projects. India objected to the Nepal acceptance of using Chinese-based products in the India-Nepal collaborated projects also. This is one of the issue. And recently, certain airports are developed in the Nepal by taking assistance from the China. So Nepal is asking India that to allow aerial space of India for the overflight to the new airports of Nepal. But India is not accepting this request. Now, these are the issues that are recently hindering the seamless dialogue between India and Nepal. Now, other also saying that Nepal has a issue of loan waiver from China also. Nepal PM has a context of discussing loan waiver from China of $220 million. The author also said that the spokespersons of the Nepal saying that not accepting allowing of airspace to take overflight to Nepal is like an economic coercion in the region. Now, this is what the context of the news. Now, from the mains perspective, we will analyze the India-Nepal relations, especially from the GS paper 2 perspective. Now, what is the significance of Nepal for India? As a bordering state, Nepal will act as a buffer state for any possible aggression from the China. So, geographically, it acts as a geopolitical buffer state. Now, in terms of the ecology and hydropower potential, many of the perennial river system has been originating in the Himalayas, especially in the Nepal area, and it is very important from the infrastructure perspective, especially hydropower. And next important thing is that Nepal is significant, especially from the cultural perspective. Nepal has important pilgrimage sites for a large number of Hindu and Buddhist pilgrims. Now, this is what mainly significance for India. Now, what is the significance for the Nepal? See, India is the largest trading partner for the Nepal. This is very important. Bilaterally, we have around $8 billion trade. Now, with respect to trade and economy, Nepal is a landlocked country. Now, Nepal has an agreement of open border in which people, goods, and services can move freely. In way, it is helping Nepal very much. Next, trade and economy. Now, India is one of the largest investor in the Nepal, especially Indian firms providing many manufacturing and services in banking, education sector, and businesses. Next, developmental assistance. Nepal is one of the countries that get majority of the assistance from India, especially in the sectors like education, healthcare, infrastructure, like dams, reservoirs, etc. Now, defense cooperation. India and Nepal have bilateral military exercise called Surya Kiran that ensures cooperation and coordination between military. Not only that, there is Gorkha regiments. There are people in the hill sections of the Nepal who is being recruited and trained under the Indian Army as a Gorkha regiments. Now, not only that, India helped in the modernization and supply of equipment to the Indian Army also and training of Nepal Army personnel. Next, humanitarian assistance. See, Nepal is often facing the issue of earthquakes, landslides. Now, India is the first responder in the region, helping holistically in rehabilitation, evacuation, relief, and assistance. Now, multilateral partnership. Now, India and Nepal have membership in the SAARC, BIMSTEC. Now, Hence, India and Nepal has a role to play collaboratively for the regional stability and multilateralism. Now, there are certain challenges for the India-Nepal relations. The first important challenge is the territorial disputes, especially the disputes of Kalapani, Limpiadora, Lipulek, which are the bordering between the India and Nepal in the Uttarakhand. No, actually in 1860s or 1870s, British demarcated the boundaries between India and Nepal. But the border between India and Nepal is very porous in nature, hence often borders used to change. Because of these changes, there is a dispute of claiming over certain regions in the bordering between India and Nepal. Especially these areas presently are in the control of India, but these are claimed by the Nepal. Now, recently, unilaterally, Nepal released certain maps by claiming these areas and included these areas in the Nepal maps. This strained the relations between India and Nepal. Now, this is one of the issues. Now, another important issue is China's intervention, especially Belt and Road Initiative. From the China's perspective, Nepal is one of the important part of the Belt and Road Initiative and hence investing a lot of infrastructure projects in the China. Now, this is one of the important issue, and because China is leveraging its debt trap policy, in which Nepal being obligated to listen to the China's terms, and especially there is a close alignment because of the political ideology and relevance because of the communist parties that are there in the Nepal and China, and this is one of the important issue that straining the India-Nepal relations. Next, internal security. Because of the open border regime that is there between India and Nepal, a lot of infiltration, especially fake currencies, drugs, militants are entering India using this open border regime. And next important issue is trust and ethnic differences. Recently, in the political rallies of Nepal, one of the district in the bordering of India and Nepal has been excluded socially. The major reason is that these people are ethnically related to India and supporting India against the politics of the Nepal. This is what the alleged issues. No, in this issue, Nepal is also saying that India is involved in the internal affairs, especially politics of the Nepal. Now, this is an allegation. No, these are the issues between the India and Nepal. Now, as it is said, the author also said that yes, India is following the neighborhood first policy. So, India should treat Nepal as a non-reciprocal in nature, should have continuous engagement, communication, as by leveraging the cultural ties, especially. We often say that India-Nepal relations is based on the roti kapada. Thus, this is the end of the news. If you want these slates are available in the PPT form. You can download it from the description.